In this video, we're going to cover some of the Figma's most unique aspects that make UX design and wireframing easy. So let's get started. I'm going to go into design mode, and this is where we left off. We created these designs from the last video. And in order to kind of make this more look like this, and let me open up the final product that we are going to be building. So this is the final product that we will be building, and we start off by creating some reusable components. So if you're a dev, you know what I'm talking about. And then we'll use these reusable components in our other elements, which are more specific to that functionality that we're showing the user interface. And of course, the unique experience, the unique feature of Figma is that with the interactions between these specific pages, you can also make these interactions much more reusable and global. So we can add interactions in our components that can then kind of point to different pages, and it will make things very simple. I'll go over it one step at a time. So let's go over and start from the beginning. First thing we're going to cover are variables. So variables, as you would know, how they work, the way you would define in Figma is you click on the canvas here, somewhere empty, and on the right you will see you'll get these local variables, local styles, and export page. By the way, this is the page color, which is the full canvas. I can make it a bit darker if it makes it easy to distinguish between the frames and the rest of the canvas. So I click on this dark gray area, which is the canvas, and the local variables has this knob here. If you click on it, the open variables pop-up will show. Then we can start creating variables like this. You can also create collections, but we don't need to bother with that. So create variables, and for us, we're going to be setting some colors. So the first one is going to be white. The second one is just a simple black color. And the other one is going to be gray. Okay, and the black is all zeros. And the gray, I don't have it memorized, but I think this is DDD or something like that. Let me try typing that in. Nope, it's somewhere in the middle right here. Okay, so those are our three colors. That's mainly what we're going to use. And maybe I'll add the color red also, just in case if we need to distinguish something from the rest. That's it. And how is this used? Well, if I come over here and on a black item that we have selected here, this button right here, let me zoom in so it's obvious. So if I double click, select the rectangle, I'll click this fill, and instead of custom, I'll go into the libraries tab over here and I'll select black this way. And let me actually do that for the rest. And there's an easy way of doing it in this case is I can select the frame and not go into individual buttons here. I can select the full frame, and in here, the selection colors on the right will show all the colors that have been used in this frame. And because we restricted ourselves to two colors here, black, white, these are the only two colors being shown. So I can select the black here. I can select that 00 color here, go to libraries and select black. And right now, all our components, if I drill down to my button, you see the black is the actual black variable we selected. Even this component that has a stroke, that the stroke color is black, and so the black color is also selected as well. We can do the same with register, so let's do that. Now you can see there are three colors, even though these two are the same, but one is using a variable, the other one's using the custom color. So let's go to libraries, assign to this black as well. Now we get two colors. Let's do the same with white. I'm going to select the FFF for that frame and FFF for this frame as well. Go to libraries, select white. I'll do it one more time slowly so you can see. I'll do it for user translations. Select the full frame, scroll down so you can see selection colors. And in here, I'm going to select the 000 and click on libraries, select black, and do the same for the bottom one as well. I mistakenly selected black for the FFF. If you do that, all the colors combine and you can't go back. So make sure you undo that. I'll select white, and instead of this blue, I'm actually going to select gray. All right, we can do the same for multiple frames. I'm going to select both of these frames and do it all in one go. So as you might have guessed, what's the benefit of doing this? I can go to the local variables here, and if my black is too dark, I can make it charcoal, so I can bring it up a bit, and you can see on my canvas the color is changing as well. So I'll make it slightly less dark and the white slightly less white, so I'll bring it down a notch, just a bit, so it's not all white. Okay, and the selection color, I picked gray, which is fine right now, and this is what you will see. So that's the first element with variables. You can also create other variables. We're not going to deal with that in this video. Next up, styles. You can see underneath we got local styles. So if you click on here, you can select what kind of style you want to create. These are reusable styles. What does that mean? There's another way I create, which is a bit more easier. So for example, I got this register text here and I got this verify code here. The styles for both of these are the same, even the same with the style of this translate button here. So what I can do is actually come here, select this, go to this text, and let's say I made some modifications. Maybe I made the distance between the, what is this called? The letter spacing. Maybe I adjusted it a little bit. I made it a bit smaller. I can come here and select the styles button, the three dots here. And then this pop-up will open up with text styles, and there's a plus button here. I can click on this plus button and in here name a style here. So I can call this let's call it H2, create style. And now I can go to my verify code here and then click on the same button and select H2. The nice thing about this is if I select the base canvas, come to H2, make some modifications. Instead of bold, make it semi-bold. All the text is updated automatically. So let me switch this back to bold. And I'm going to skip doing it for the rest because we're going to be updating most of these. But since while we're at this, we can make another style. Let's create this style for our header one. This is going to be extra bold. And I'm going to make everything smaller, and the size, I'm going to make it 23. And the style for this, I'm going to create a new one called H1 create style, and I'll create a new one for the input text here. These are the labels, and the size for this, I'll make it 18. And the spacing, I'll increase it a little bit, maybe by 3%. And I'll create a new style for this called just body. And of course, you can create other styles here as well. You can create color effect, but the colors we used variables here. You can mix and match, by the way. We're not going to go too deep. Essentially, you can create variables here that you can reuse in defining your styles here. I don't think that's necessary for us at this stage for wireframing, but you have that option as well. Next up is the most important part of Figma, which is the auto layouts. So let me create a new page and go over in details what auto layout is. So I'm going to create a text here. I'll just type in 1. Let's apply the type of H1 here. And I would like to put this around a circle or some square or something. So what I'll do is I'll create a circle here and move this text here right in the middle. And if you see this, because 1 is below ellipse 1, I have to move this up here so it's visible. Or you can hold the command and use the brackets or braces on your keyboards. You can move up and down like so as well. It's the Z order essentially, if you're familiar with HTML or CSS. Okay, so I've centered these. Now, if I select both of these, right, and I can group them. So if I Control G, so I group them. With this group, what I'm going to do, I'm going to duplicate this group and I'll rename this to 2 so it's easily distinguishable, 3, and I can change the color as well to something else so we can immediately spot the difference. Okay, so we got these 3 elements, And I can group these as well. So I got group, that's a hierarchy with 3 groups, each one individually circle and a string. Now, if I select the auto layout here, if I place this plus button, the auto layout is applied to this group. And you can see we got a bunch of new options here. If I select the first option here is the vertical layout or the horizontal layout. As you can see, when I switch them, we get different results. So what I can do is I can duplicate this, bring it down over here, and switch this to a vertical so you can see the difference. So we got 2 different auto layouts. One is horizontal, one is group. And let me duplicate this one more time. I'll switch this to the last one, which is wrap. And with the wrap, I can actually kind of move this container, this group that all of these items are in. And you can see it's changing, it's moving down as we are making this, reducing the size of this container, this group. This is basically providing us features like responsive design. So if we have a design that when we switch the size and we see the elements kind of move on top of each other, this allows us to create much more easier wireframes that we can change the size without doing too much work in reorganizing things. So let me switch it back to horizontal layout. And you can see here, I can change the size manually of this container, and I'll add a fill here and a stroke so it's easy to see. I'll add the fill white. There you go. So this container, this auto layout or group has 3 elements in there directly like so. And if I switch between, you can see the container itself is fixed size. So when I switch between vertical and horizontal, it doesn't change anything, the size of the container, because it's fixed. How do I know it's fixed? On the top frame, you can see the width and height of these values is set to fixed. So with this, let me show you a few things here. On the bottom, you see this horizontal gap between items. If I adjust this, it adjusts the distance between the element inside this layout. And on the bottom, we got padding, horizontal padding, and vertical padding. And you can see our elements, we can use these elements to create some nice layouts, combine them together. I'll show you in the example once we move more forward. But I wanted to showcase to you how the spacing and the margins work. And now this box right here. You can see the alignment is relative to the container. It's located on the top left. You can switch it to the top center, top right, or center it, and move it down, etc. If you double click it, it will switch to expanding the elements. So the distance between the two is automatically determined, which means if I come to the frame, select it, if I change the size of this, the elements automatically change their position. So no longer the position of these elements is absolute XYZ, these are relative, much like how it's done in HTML or in web browser when their layouts are presented. This is much more closer to software development, wireframes. That's why it's much more preferable to do it this way. Lastly, with auto layout, and let me duplicate this, and I'll make the size a bit smaller. What you have here, if I switch this back to not expanding and just fixed size, on the top we got several options for the width, and there are 2 that's displayed here. Once we nest an auto layout inside another layout, we'll get a 3rd option. So right now it's fixed or hug content. So if I click hug content, you will see the X is hugging all the content. However, because our X horizontal padding is 17, it's still at that pad. So if I make this 0, it's completely hugging now. I'll make the vertical padding 0 as well. So if I switch from fixed to hug content, this is how the frame will look like. As immediately, if you start changing the shape, automatically it switches from hug content to fixed. So you have to manually come here and change to hug content. Lastly, let me duplicate this, and I'm going to nest 2 of these inside each other. So I'll take this frame number 9 that I just created, select frame number 8 and paste it inside frame number 8, or if it doesn't do it, I'll just manually move it on the outline here. So what we have here, we have frame number 8 here, and we have frame number 9, which is basically we nested two of them inside each other. And to distinguish between the two, I'm going to select the top level parent and change the fill to gray. And then the nested one, which is the child, it's still white. If it's still hard to see, I'm going to select the top parent. I'm going to come over here and change the horizontal and vertical padding to 10 and 10. That's much easier to see. So this is one element all together, and then we got second, third, and fourth element. So if I select frame 8 here, if I change the auto layout to vertical, it won't change the nested one. It'll just change everything, all the children. So it's treating this as one of its children as well. With that, now if I select the child, over here, I have three options now for the width and the vertical size. And that is the last item, which is fill container. So what is this option? If I select fill container for both, nothing will happen, but I'm going to duplicate this and show you the difference. And let me move this down. And for the bottom one, instead of fill, I'm going to just say hot content for both the vertical and the horizontal width of this element. So for the top frame, I'm going to delete this child node number 1 and see what happened with this element. If I delete number 1 here on the bottom, you can see this element is not filling in the main container. The main container here, if I select it, you'll see as a fixed size. I can make it fixed here, so it's simple to kind of wrap our minds around it. So both of these, the top parent has a fixed width and height. And as soon as I delete elements from the top one, this child, because its size is set to fill, it'll fill in all the gaps that the parent allows it to grow. However, the bottom one, because it's still hugging the content, it's not going to expand. In fact, if I delete more items, all of them were kind of going to the center, because for the top level frame, we selected everything to stack align in the center. We could have changed it to be on the left. Same principle. So if I selected number 3 here, and instead of fixed, I said fill container, the circle will grow large like so. And now if I change the size of this top container like this, you can see that based on the size of the parents, that element number 3 is going to change its size. Same with frame number 8. If I change its size, you can see the white box is growing and shrinking because that is trying to fill in whatever space it can. Okay, I hope this makes sense as far as principle goes. It's very similar to the Flex CSS style that you can apply to a div. And on its own, it might be a bit, maybe it's easy to understand as far as concepts, but once you start using it, it might get a bit confusing, but not to worry. We'll use it in the next few videos, combine all of these together, and it will make sense. Of course, you want to keep things simple. You don't want to create very complicated frames or containers like this. And then, for example, set this to fill, and then make this, for example, fill container as well, and then this one to hug. So if you start doing a bit more complicated things like this, then you kind of lose control of to understand what's going on here. So next up, we're gonna go over components. So these we went over all these elements, and components are one of the building blocks of creating good UI. And let me show you what components are using an example. So we had a button here. You see this one that we copy pasted it and used it everywhere in our UI. Essentially, we're creating a class that we can instantiate it in different locations. And that's kind of exactly what a component is. So let me copy this, bring back to page number 2. I'm going to paste it here. And we didn't need to copy and paste it. I just did it so to make things simple. So this button here, which is basically a rectangle and a text, I'm going to actually create an auto layout of this. So I selected this button and created an auto layout. And before I move forward, you can see the rectangle that it was there initially. Now it's gone. This frame is now kind of merged on its own. Figma did this for us. It basically removed the rectangle, applied its style to the top container. That way, this container has the same sort of properties as the rectangle. Nothing has changed. You can see the text here is shown, and it can be shown in the middle. If I select the frame, you can see it's right there in the middle. And also it automatically applied some padding for us. Here you see 4 to 5 and 15. We can actually make these very small, like 2 and 2. And I can make this button size like a fixed size. So this width, I'll make this 100 and let's say 30, and the height, I'll make this 52. Okay, so let's say this is our button, we're happy with it, or let's apply some rounded corners as well. Let's type 10. There you go. We didn't need to do that, but I'm just showing you for a demonstration. On the top in the middle, you see this create component button here. If you click this, this becomes a component, and in the left, it shows as a purple. So what is a component? Is essentially a class that we created. This is the class. And once we start duplicating this, these become instances. And on the left, you can see the icon is a bit different. The component, the main one, has 3 squares, 3 squares kind of slanted, and the instance is a outline of those squares. And if I come back, if I create multiple of these, and even change the text here, and come back on the main one and change the fill color to gray, it applies to the rest of the instances. And this is the power of components. One of the most powerful things about components. It has a bunch of other features as well. I'll show you in a second. The other feature about components is that each of these items that it's an instance, you can right click here and you can detach instance. Now, if I make changes to the original one, if I come back and change the fill back to black, it doesn't change the detached instance. Also, if I delete the main one by mistake, but I have this dangling instance in here, I can right click on this instance, go over here and select main component. And then we have this option to restore the main component. So doing this will bring back the main one that it is essentially the master class. The last item you saw that I manually typed in cancel here. What you can do is very similar to, if you're familiar with React, very similar to React, I can come here and specify specific attributes of this button to be applied as props. So I'm interested in allowing users to change the text of a button very easily. So I'll come over here, I'll double click on this text, and in here, I'll go over here under text, and you can see here, because it's a component, it has some extra display options here, which is this icon, namely. So these icons create properties for the component. For the layer here, this one creates a Boolean property that controls whether if it's displayed or not. And for the text, it creates a string property that we can control the text. So let's do that. Let me click on this button here. And it's asking, how do you want to name your property? I'll just say label. And the value, instead of register, I'll say button label. I'll just say label. Okay. So now if I come back and click on the instant, you see over here, I got a label that I can change this to, let's say, register, and it will update the button text automatically. I can duplicate this and select this one instead of register and say cancel, without going and drilling down the component and changing the text. I can also add another element here. So this is, so I can do one more element here, which we're going to use. So let's say I want to add a loading indicator for our button. If you click on it, it's doing something. Let me create a loading indicator really quick. I'll just use an ellipse. like this. I'll get rid of the fill, add stroke. And for the stroke color, I'll select white. Let me increase the width by 3. And also I'll make a cut somewhere here. So if I double click this, and for this one of these elements, I will come over here using the pen. And I want to add an extra element here. And what I'll do, I'll come here and delete this. So I basically cut open halfway through. And also one more thing. If I select this under stroke, it says inside. I'm going to center this and make it smaller. With that, I'm going to cut this and select my main component and paste it here. Change the size, so instead of 24, it is 18. And move this to the left. So this is kind of just a placeholder to indicate it is loading or if it's doing something, but I don't want to show this for all this. For example, register, cancel. I don't want to show this all the time. I like to control it. So I'll select this element here. And on the right panel, you see under layers, we could select the opacity of this layer or completely hide it. Like if I click this eye icon, it completely hides it. We can make a Boolean property for this. So I click this Boolean property and I'll say show it, or I'll just say is loading. And I'll create the property. There you go. So with this done, if I select my register button here, you can see over here, I have this Boolean property is loading. I'll turn this off and the loading indicator is gone. All right, with that covered, let's go over the component variants. And let me move these over here and delete the cancel. So variants are essentially alternatives or just a variation of your component. And the way you create them is by this button on the top. You have to select your component and then this button will be displayed. And then you can click on add variant, which will show you something like this with the purple, purple dotted line around the component. And it will show you 2 with a default and a variant. If you double click the variant, you can see the name is actually shown like so. Property 1 equals variant 2. And then here it says property 1 equals default. So what is this? So if I click the top level frame or component, here you can see I have a property 1 value that's automatically assigned by Figma when I created a variant. So I can double click this property and name this type, because what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to create a secondary button that's an outline view. And to do that, I'll come here and get rid of the fill. I'll add a stroke of black. And I'll change the text color also to black. And also this half circle. So with that, if I come over here, select my instance, you can see I have this type default and a variant 2. Let's actually come back here and rename it. So I'll click on this one and the type, I'll double click variant 2 and say outline. Now let's go back to our instance. Under type, I got default. And if I select outline, you see it switches the view to this outline button. And of course, we got the rest of our stuff, the loading indicator and the label. So you can see we're kind of, it's like we're creating a class, a React class, a UI component, and we're adjusting its users' interfaces by passing in, controlling the props. So if I enable the loading and I switch between, you can see it's handling that pretty well. So with this, you can create multiple variations, and usually what people have done is they create a dark and light mode, small button, different components have different elements in there, and you can probably find resources online that you can reuse instead of creating your own. And one more thing about components, you can actually create interactions between your variations. So let's say if I come here and duplicate this variant, and I'm going to just select this variant, and I clicked on Command D to duplicate, and let me move this over here. And I want to create a hover effect for my buttons. So I'm going to come here and change the fill to gray. So this is like if I hover over my button, this is what's going to be displayed. And what I want to do, first of all, I need to select this and the type. This is default hover. And let me select the default one and make this lowercase default. So with this, if I come over here, same thing as before, outline, we have a default hover, that's fine. But what I want to do is during our interactions, our prototyping, when I want to hover my mouse over the default button, switch it over to this background color. And you can do that by going into the prototype view here. And then with the prototype view, I'll select this label. I'll click and drag this over to here. And instead of on click, I'll say while hovering. And I'll do the reverse. So I'll select this one and then drag and drop, click and drag, create a path to the default one. And then instead of on click, I'll say mouse leave. Switch it back to the original. Let me add some distance so you can see. So from here, it's going to this one. And from this hover state, it's going back to default on mouse out. We can actually give this a try. I can copy this, go back to my main page and delete this register button here and paste it over here. And let me put back the interaction that existed. Okay, let me click on register and click on present. Now, if I bring my mouse over, you can see it changes color right there. So so we get this kind of free interaction sort of indicator without doing too much work. As you saw, if we use this button everywhere else in our frames, we'll get the same effect without doing any extra work. Okay, with that said, there's one more item we need to cover, and that is sections. So sections are essentially, if you go under frames, it's a relatively new feature. It's section here. You can click on it and click and drag and cover your elements, very similar to a frame. The nice thing about section is you can actually, let me go back to my main page. What you can do is, you can see here from the register confirmation, I went straight to this view. Well, what if the interaction that we created jumps from this user interface? Let's say if I do come over here, let's say this is incorrect, but I'm just showing you what I mean. Let's say if I move back to the main one, right? Or move back to over here. Let's see what happens. If I click this and press play. Now I click translate, I got a new element here, I click back and forth, whatnot. And if I click this button here, and I got two translations as you can see. If I click this element here, let's say this is another view that's like a settings or whatever. I press cancel or register or confirm. I go back to this view, but I only have two translations here. But previously you saw that we did translate and then we went back. So if I click here and then confirm, I lost that previous state. So with slices, what I can do, I can come here and wrap all of these into a section, not slice section. I can name this user translation. And from this confirm, I'm actually going to just go straight to this section here instead of going to the first one. So with this, let's give this a try and see how that works. So I click translate, same thing here. Now click here to go back to this verification, confirm. We are going back to the page that we exited from that section. And this is a nice feature because it reduces quite a lot of work and then creates kind of a seamless flow, especially if you're showing it to other people or they're interacting with it to a client. It will confuse them more if it kind of jumps around. So with that, and also sections, if you can see on the left, it also wraps everything under a section here. So it's nice, and all our frames here under this section. So it's very nice and neatly organized. So with that said, we we covered all the core features that you as a developer should be using or would be using when you're creating wireframes. In the next video, we are going to start creating components given with all the information that we just learned. All right, thank you. I'll see you in the next video.